your therapist is good, things to look out for: number one, do they give you their unsolicited feedback or opinion about yourself in the situation that you're bringing to therapy? I'll share a personal example with you. In my case, it was actually with my hypnotherapist, whom I no longer hire anymore. A lot of our more recent topics have been about my dating journey. In the first 5 minutes of the session, typically there's an intake. So she asks you, what are you wanting to talk about? And I share the details and the context of what my dating situation is. And almost always, immediately after I share sort of my situation with how I am facing dating struggles and how that's been going, she will immediately tell me her opinion about what I'm doing wrong in these dating scenarios, or how she thinks that these guys are not a good fit for me, or whatever it is. A good therapist or hypnotherapist or whatever type of practitioner they are, they're supposed to be helping you and not involving their own assumptions or opinions in your situation. You're already colored and having so many emotions in the situation. They should not be adding their own color to it and having another layer for you to solve. That is actually not helpful. It's counterproductive. And a good therapist will always refrain from giving you that feedback unless you specifically ask them for it. And I know practitioners who, even when you ask them for it, they will question that and they'll really challenge, why are you asking me for my opinion? And it is only after when I really articulate that I really want to get their take and want their opinion on something that they will actually let me know what exactly it is that they think about my situation. Even then, they do it very tenderly and gingerly. Throughout the years, even in my own therapy journey, I'm always surprised to find how many practitioners tend to err on the side of giving you his or her opinion more than they don't. So this is actually a very common thing that you will see. And so because this is so common, this is my very first tip for you to watch out for. The second thing to look out for is all good therapists have some sort of a consultation call so that you can ask them questions before you begin actually having sessions with them. Typically, this is a session that's just 30 minutes long or perhaps even shorter, and they can be free or at least very little compared to what their regular session rate is. And I highly encourage you to find somebody who would offer this, because every good therapist knows that it's actually a relationship that's co-created. So they're picking you as much as you're picking them, and having this consultation time set aside will only help them figure out if you are a good fit for each other or not. Segueing into what a normal session looks like, let's pretend that we're talking about a 1 hour long call, which is very common in therapy. You could have anything between a 30-minute session, 45 minutes, or an hour long. You should all be doing an intake at the very beginning of the session, outside of small talk. So if your therapist spends way too much time with you doing small talk, something is going on. In the intake part of the session, they should be asking you what your goals are, what you want out of the session, also to listen to you give context to them on what you want to talk about that day. Hopefully this is intuitive for you, but the therapist is there to help you in the session. You're not there to have small talk and work the weather. If you haven't picked your therapist yet, in your consultation call, I would encourage you to ask them what therapy modalities they practice. Every therapist should be able to explain to you in a way that you can understand what it is that you can expect in the therapy. For example, if it's CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, you can expect to have a lot of talking back and forth during the main part of the session. Another example of a therapy modality is called EMDR. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. This is something where there's actually not very much talking from the therapist's end. There are tools that they use, either a light or using something like a pointer for you to have your eyes follow them, but they're actually not talking very much at all. If your therapist knows multiple therapy modalities, ask them how they see them using their skills and modalities in your particular situation. So this is also a great place in the consultation to give them some context on what you want to work on in the session, and listen to what they say to you about what they think they can do with you. If you're beginning on your therapy journey, I wouldn't worry so much about the modalities just yet. I think it's really important for you to just experiment and try therapy in general. So CBT is very, very common. Most therapy sessions and therapists are trained in CBT, and I would just go with that. Let's imagine you've hired your therapist and now you're going into your very first session. You've done the intake, you know what you want to do, and you've told them in the first 5 minutes of the session what you want to work on that day. How do you know if the therapy is working, or how do you know if your therapist is a good one in the session? The easiest way for me to think about this is if I ask myself, how do I feel? This is a little bit harder for folks who are very logic driven, but in my experience, even outside of therapy, even for folks who are logic brained, and you can always tell if you feel like something is not sitting well with you. It's an icky feeling, and typically you would just explain like, I don't like this, I don't feel good. And myself, I am now more in touch with my body emotions and somatic sensations in my body. So I know that when something is not sitting well with me, I feel it in my chest. And if it's something that's sort of in the realm of shame and anger and fear, I actually hold my breath because my body thinks that I'm in danger, and it's just holding my breath for me. So that's how I know something is not sitting well with me. Sometimes you can tell how you feel right in the session, in the moment that your therapist asks you a question. But other times you might feel it after the session ends. Maybe you're ruminating or mulling over something that they said or asked you, couldn't quite place it in the session while it's happening. This is when I encourage everybody to take a moment after therapy to either journal, or if you don't want to write anything down, that's okay, but just set aside time immediately after the session ends for you to post-process your own therapy session. Even if it takes 5 minutes, it's not a long time, but it's going to be immensely helpful for you to reflect upon your therapy journey and make little iterations as you go. A lot of times I notice this when I have a topic that's really meaty and really big and overwhelming to talk about. I have so many emotions in session that it's hard for me to really keep track of all the threads that are going on. So if I give myself some time right after the session to post-process what is going on, maybe this thread was really poignant for me because of XYZ reason, and maybe in some other sentence or other thing that she pointed out for me, I felt a different way. As long as I can try to capture as much of this as I can, I know that it's going to benefit me when I reflect on it. Moving into the next point, something you can ask yourself after a few sessions is, are you making progress? Are you where you want to be? And how is this not fitting expectations, if you had expectations that you communicated in the very first place? Sometimes, depending on the topic, you might need several sessions of therapy to work through whatever it is bothering you. I have had topics that I have talked about in therapy for years now, and well, this is a separate conversation, but because it wasn't working as well for me for those topics, that was how I ended up seeking hypnotherapy, which was awesome for me, and I'll talk about in a different video. Therapy is self-development, and it's self-improvement, and it's growth. So much like all of those things, it would behoove you if you didn't ask yourself, are you making progress to what you wanted to do in this time with these sessions, with the money that you're paying for therapy? And if you're not, a good therapist is actually comfortable having this discussion with you. So that's another thing I would ask you to look out for. Is your therapist open to receiving feedback? When they receive feedback, can they make the adjustments to get you what you want out of these sessions? And if they cannot, can they communicate that with you? Another benchmark you can use to evaluate your therapist over a longer period of time is asking yourself if you are building a relationship with this person, if you see them as an advocate for you, if you feel that you are supported by them, if you would be their friend even. All these feelings of warm fuzzies and having that trust with each other, having this affinity for each other, are signs that you are building this grounded and supported relationship with your therapist. A lot of what I shared in this video is from my own lived experiences. Really, there's not a roadmap to excelling in therapy. At the end of the day, I would just ask myself, again, just like I said, if I am getting what I want out of these sessions, or even am I having a good time? I actually surprisingly have a great time in my therapy sessions. I've had a rapport with my current therapist now for over a year. She has seen me from my very last breakup to, oh my goodness, all the things that has happened to me in this past year. I really feel like she is a friend, even though it's very one-sided, because when we log on for our virtual sessions, she's immediately asking me what I want and how she can support me. And so I actually don't know very much about her beyond her therapy practice. This is not common and case dependent on person, so if you are interested and you're like me, this is something you can consider doing as well. But my therapist actually plays an educator role for me. So sometimes I will ask her questions on the theory of therapy and therapy questions, and even ask her some case studies. who has she talked to, what are they like, and she'll never share, of course, any confidential information, but I'm always curious sort of what other people are working on in their sessions and sort of what breakthroughs she's seen, because, and I think I like asking that because I'm genuinely just curious. I'm just a curious person, but I also am curious about what other people are doing in their sessions. If you have other questions about therapy that I have not covered, leave a comment on this video and I will make a new video about it.